What's the deal, my people? You know it is Don Tony Teflon, and I'm back at you another one. And this one is the first episode ever of Asked and Answered. And in this series, I will be taking one question from the chat and answering this question. And I would most likely have a special guest on with me, just in case, you can get both sides of this question. We're going to do our best to answer it and give you all the facts and the details about it. And so let me introduce my first guest ever on this show. It's my friend and yours, Bridge 4.
What's going on, dude? Thank you for having me on. Like we just spoke about, I love this series that you're about to do. And I absolutely, this could be my number one question to talk about. So thank you very much for having me on today.
No doubt. So the question that we are going through today, I'm sure you've seen the thumbnail, but is who is actually the greatest fighter in Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire history? Out of all the fighters there, who is truly the greatest fighter of them all? Now, everyone has their opinions, and I'm sure you do. And I'm sure a lot of these opinions are based on, I will say, being a fan of that person. But what we're going to do, because I've boxed for over 7 years of my life, Bridge 4 is a big UFC guy. So we have intimate knowledge about actual fighting. And we're going to use that knowledge to break down exactly who truly is the greatest fighter of all time in Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire history. So right off the bat, Bridge, who do you believe is the greatest fighter in Game of Thrones history?
All right, real quick. So there's this one quote from Barristan that I love where he's like, on any given day could be anyone's day. Because, if you're good fighters, even someone that's worse can win a fight. But it's fun to talk about who is the best fighter. Now, we have so many awesome fighters from past history, but I'd prefer to look at someone from the more present history, just because we know a little bit more about them. In the past, sometimes, the winners write the history. So I am going to go with my man, the young lion, Sir Jaime Lannister.
I think he's a great pick. All right, especially now when they're talking about two-handed Jaime, not one-handed.
Exactly.
We're talking about Jaime Lannister in his prime, and I think that is a very good pick. I can understand why you would pick him, but I can't go that route with Jaime Lannister. And not because I don't like the character personally, because this has got nothing to do with my personal feelings. Mm-hmm. This is just truly who I believe is the greatest fighter out of everybody of all time.
Who do you got?
Teflon, I'm going to have to go with Robert Baratheon in his prime. I think he could beat any fighter in the melee type fight, one-on-one. I think he's the man that can get it done. So we're going to go into things and we're going to try to discuss it. We're going to see at the end of this if we still feel the same exact way when it's all said and done. All right. So, Bridge, I'm sure you have something to open with your guy. I will allow you to open real quick before we go into these points.
So first, let me just do the intro to Jaime, even though we're going to speak about him in his prime. Like you said, it's the two-handed thing, a healthy two-handed Jaime. But before we even get there, just Jaime's background is that he was so young. He squired for Lord Sumner Clegane at 11 years old. And here's a line. I didn't even know this until I did a little research today. He won his first melee at 13 years old. And the fact that they say he won his first melee means he won other melees during the years, which, there are people like Sandor's won them, John Royce has won them. I'm sure King Robert Baratheon probably won them. I mean, maybe before he was king. But I didn't even realize, I have so many facts about Jaime that I've stored over the years. I didn't realize that he had won a melee at 13, and that was his first, meaning he's won other ones. So Jaime's awesome. Let me say one other thing about just when he was young is that he fought, obviously he was a squire for Sumner Clegane, but he traveled with Sir Arthur Dayne, who many look at as the best fighter ever, and he fought the Smiling Knight. He was only 15 years old, and he was able to at least hold off the Smiling Knight, which people called the mountain of the time. He was pretty good. I mean, Arthur Dayne basically schooled him. But at the same time, if a 15-year-old Jaime can hold off the Smiling Knight, then what could a healthy prime 25-year-old Jaime do? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love Jaime. I've got a lot of other points to go through. But what do you got about Bobby B? I love him. He's awesome, and I would hate to see these two. Oh, I guess I'd love to see these two fight.
When I deal with Bobby B, the number one thing I'm going to say about Bobby B is that this man is just physically strong. We know that he is so strong that when he had his war hammer, they did show it in the show, but it's not the same. But this war hammer was so heavy, Ned Stark couldn't lift it with two hands, and Robert swung that thing around with one with no problem.
Thinking he could end the rebellion with a single swing of his sword. I knocked him down with the hammer. God, gods, I was strong then. Caved in his breastplate. Probably shattered every rib he had.
Yeah.
So just imagine that. The grown man couldn't budget with two hands, but Robert picked up with one and threw it all around. And I think that strength has a lot to do with this when we deal with fighting. And I think that his skill level is that also we hear about Robert fighting melees laughing the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so he's toying with everybody. It's like a joke to him.
A total madman.
While he's fighting. So when we come break down fighting, and I said you are very skilled in the UFC fighting, I'm skilled in boxing. There is a couple of things that we can go by in fights that matter, that we know that matter, right? Number one, we'll say, is technique, right?
Yeah.
Skill level. Now, we have a bunch of people who are very skillful, right? Sir Arthur Dayne is very skillful, right? We have him. Sir Barristan Selmy is very skillful. So how do you think that Jaime Lannister matches up skill-wise to all these other fighters?
So you know that fight he had with Brienne? I love the books for... Oh, God, the books are so good. The show is great, too. But, so when Jaime was fighting Brienne in the books, he, like, granted, like you said, you made a great point in defense of Jaime, is that when he fought her, he had been starving in a dungeon for a while, so he was malnourished, and he had the chains around his wrist. So he was at an extreme disadvantage against Brienne. Brienne had just come in first place in a melee of 116 people. So, and then there's two things about that. The first thing that comes across is that when he's fighting her, he thinks, oh my lord, she's stronger than me. So at that point, you're like, wait a second, Brienne is stronger than Jaime? With that said, Jaime was pretty strong. At least you have to take this with a grain of salt because it's his own opinion of himself. He says that he was strong, one of the strongest people in Westeros. There were people like Robert Baratheon, Crakehall, the Clegane brothers, Geralt Hightower, Arthur Dayne. They were all stronger than him. But he considers himself a very strong person aside from them. And in his head, again, take this with a grain of salt, but in his head, he's like, but I could take any of them because of my speed. So I think that relates to the question you just asked in terms of skill. Like, obviously, he had great training, so he's very skilled. He was a sort of a child prodigy. And in terms of skill, speed, it's like when Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo, it's like he said a precision over power. I could see Jaime being that speed and precision, boom, boom, potentially getting a Bobby B. But that's a scary fight, man. That is a scary fight. I'll
also say that we're dealing with the right skill level. When we see different skill levels in especially, let's talk a little bit about the UFC real quick. Now, who would you say is probably the most skillful person in the UFC?
Great question. I don't know. You could say George St. Pierre, but I think that he's more of just like the smartest game planner. It's got to be Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the GOAT. He's the greatest ever, I think. So he can do everything. Jon Jones won the a junior national wrestling championship, and now he's a lethal striker. So it's like he can control whether the fight's on the feet or on the ground, and he'll beat you both places.
Then that makes a lot of difference, right? So if you have someone who is only good on their feet, they are subjected to be getting tackled, right? And if you have someone who's only good taking people down, they're subjected to be getting jabbed up and punched and knocked out, right? Yep. So your skill level has to be good. Now, it's a little different because it's usually with a sword fighting, right? So it comes to sword fighting. I think when we look at sword fighting, we have to say, I think maybe we could agree on this, that Sir Arthur Dayne is probably the most skillful person that we've seen in all the books when it comes down to skill. And maybe Sir Barristan could be quite the second best person. When great skill, if we just measure them all up a skill level, that would be one, that would be two, and then everyone else is below them.
Can I throw in something here? This is a really cool fun fact. If from reading the story, that's exactly what I would get from it. It's like Arthur Dayne, the most skilled, and Barristan, the second most skilled. I'm very high on Jaime, so I would throw him in there with the mix as one, two, or three, but in that mix in terms of skill. But here's a fun fact that it's so I don't even know if you can find it on the internet anymore. There was a page where George R. Martin did this MTV interview, and George R. Martin said, they asked him, they said, who would win in a fight, Sir Arthur Dayne or Barristan the Bold? Again, not many people know this because it got deleted, but it was there. I've seen it with my eyes. And he said, I think you can find a text of it, but he said that Arthur Dayne had Dawn. Dawn is it's a special sword. It's like a Valyrian steel sword. So he goes, Arthur Dayne would have the advantage in that fight, but if they were fighting with equal swords, it'd be a coin flip. So that's a little thing that people always say Barristan number 2, and that's what I would have gotten from the books too. But if we can take George's offline statements, then they're equal in his head. Shout out to Barristan. He's pretty badass.
Because we also heard Ned Stark says that his father said that's the best fighter he's ever seen. Like, out of all the fighters he's ever seen, there's never been someone more skilled than Sir Barristan Selmy. But and we look at boxing, we look at skilled fighters. You look at Sugar Ray Leonard, one of the best fighters of all time. You look at Floyd Mayweather, he's probably the best fighters of all time, right? These are guys whose skill level is well beyond other people. Zab Judah was up there. Shane Mosley was up there. You know, Larry Holmes is up there. All these guys were masters at their craft, and it carried them so far. So I think that skill level truly does have a major point to deal with. And when I look at Robert B and his skill, I say the thing that gives him different, he may not be as good as a sword fighter with them, but how many people are used to fighting people with a warhammer with a sword, right? So I think that his weapon, the warhammer, other people may be used to fighting other swords. And Sir Barristan, he may be great defending off and other people with their sword, but wouldn't he be that great defending off this heavy warhammer being swung at him with that force, right? So that's where I look at the skill. I look at this weapon right here that Robert's bringing into battle is such a unique weapon compared to what everyone else is used to seeing, that I think it could give him a little bit of edge. Not that he be as skilled as them, but his weapon may give him an edge fighting against somebody with a sword.
So you basically said we were talking about skill, and then you said but his strength, and you know what Lord Eddard says about the word but. Everything that comes down. I'm just kidding. No, this is what's interesting about this debate is because there's so many ways to interpret fighting, right? It's like, are you fighting in a line, in a shield wall? Are you fighting in a many on one, like Arthur Dane fighting 4-on-1? I think Arthur Dane's better suited to handle that position than a Bobby B. But we're just talking about sort of like a duel, like who is the best fighter? Yes. If there are two guys wearing plate and mail, a sword is not that good an option against plate and mail. You know, you've got to find the little spots to get in there. Whereas Bobby B, like I'm sort of defending your guy now, he could just smash through people. Or I guess he did that, right? Didn't he do that to Rhaegar? He smashed his chest.
And I think that, and that's why right now I know a lot of people are fans of Khal Drogo, but I'm going to eliminate Khal Drogo now. Just for that reason that you just said. He doesn't wear any armor. It doesn't matter to me how skilled he is. When you don't have armor and you're going into the battle with no armor, and most likely he will go in with no armor because he doesn't wear armor, you're too much vulnerable to someone who has armor. And so I think he's a great fighter. He's got a lot of strength. He's got skill. But I think that one fact right there with Khal Drogo going in there with no armor or light armor is going to hold him down. We see in the show exactly that's how Sir Jorah Mormont was able to win his battles.
Good point.
Because he used the armor. He caught the guy's sword and slit his throat, right?
Yep.
You know how to use your armor. The Jorah wasn't as, he wasn't at that time skilled, but he was skilled enough to grab that guy's arm and hold his sword in place while he could use his. And I think that when it comes down to someone like Khal Drogo, that's one thing that would hold him back. And that's the only reason why I can't put him as one of the best fighters. I think he's one of the best, but I can't put him top tier because you have no armor. And there's just no way you can truly avoid someone at this level that you're fighting all day. And any UFC fight, someone always gets hit. And every boxing match, someone always gets hit, right? And if you get hit with a sword or get a hit with a hammer like that or have nothing, it's most likely going to be a wrap for you. So that's the reason why I can't go there. So dealing with skill, as we did, let's go to styles, right? That's what Warhammer basically we're talking about, the Warhammer everything. The next thing you have to deal with is styles, right? As we talked about before. You think Jon Jones Bones is the greatest of all time because he can match up with anybody's style, right? He's a striker and he's a grappler. And we know that styles make fights. I can give you a perfect example of that in boxing when you deal with Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, and Thomas the Hitman Hearns when they fought. Roberto Duran beat Sugar Ray Leonard in a 15-round fight. He fought Thomas Hearns. He got knocked out by Thomas Hearns in 2 rounds. Sugar Ray Leonard knocked out Thomas Hearns, right? So it's all about certain styles. Not that they're all not great fighters, but some styles do better versus other styles, right? So styles make fights, and that's why I'm saying when we deal with the Warhammer going up against mostly everyone else who's going to come in there with a sword, I think that the style of Robert Baratheon may give him a little bit of an edge over people just for that reason, and that's why I'm going to go about it. How do you feel about different styles?
Styles make fights. So, yeah, I actually, I would still want to say Jaime for other reasons of the other stuff I'd like to talk about. But in terms of styles make fights, Robert Baratheon, like you said, if we're dealing with wearing plate and mail, someone like Khal Drogo, there's two ways to look at it, because we're talking about a high fantasy here, right? So I can give some Khal Drogo fans, I can give them some leniency in the sense that we're not talking about reality. He's just super big and super fast. He can escape their blow. You know what I mean? You can make that argument if you're going to talk about truly the land of Westeros, where there's White Walkers and magic, blah, blah, blah. But we're actually approaching this with sort of like a realistic take on the fighters, and Khal Drogo's got no shot. And, even like a tier 3 fighter will probably take out an unarmored Khal Drogo. It is what it is, you know what I mean? But styles make fights. Robert Baratheon, I mean, he's king for a reason. You know what I mean? Jaime could have taken that seat. Not that he wanted it, but Jaime was sitting there. Who's king? It's Robert Baratheon. I don't know why I'm defending your man, but so I don't think, like, if you walked around Westeros and you said that right then when he won that kingdom, that seat, if you went and you said he's the best, I don't think there are too many people who would debate you, except maybe Jaime Lannister. He's I don't know about that.
I feel he definitely could. I think those are two things, and I think there's one more thing that you have to look at when there's a fight, and you know this as well as I do, Kev.
What's that?
One big factor when it comes to any fight, that weight.
Oh.
Right? Weight. There's weight classes in the UFC for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
Now, let's look at this. Conor McGregor, who do you think is the best lightweight fighter in UFC?
My buddy Jim Miller. No.
Right, so let's go with Jim Miller. Jim Miller or Habib or anyone you want to say there, right?
Lightweight, I would say Habib.
Habib's a great fighter, and they're great. Now, if you put them in there with John Jones or a heavyweight, any heavyweight, do you give them a chance of beating that heavyweight?
I mean, they will both say, let me take that fight, but no. I mean, they're, like you said, there are weight classes for a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather is a great fighter, but you put him in there with a decent heavyweight, when you're coming in Floyd Mayweather, 147 pounds, and you're going in there versus someone 245, it's a problem. You're not going to beat that man. You can have as much skill as you want. As much skill, you could be the most skillful person in the world. But when it comes down to size is king. We see that with Bronn. Bronn says that when he's about the mountain. I could do everything right, but I make one mistake, and it's all over for me. Right? So that's the fact that we see that with Oberyn. Oberyn was doing this thing. He was dancing around, but he made one mistake. This guy caught him. Fight was over. In 2 seconds, it was over. He was hitting the mountain with a lot of shots. Mountain only really need to hit him once. He punched him in the face, so it was just about over, right? One shot in the face. And then he did the overkill and break his head. That size is a huge thing. We even see, like, Sir Duncan the Tall, when you go look at Duncan. He's not that skillful of a guy, but he's a big guy. That's a great point. Yeah. And he always grabs people, usually, and gets them on the floor, and then he's able to work them that way, right?
He does like Hulk smash.
Yeah, that's the way fights happen, right? So when you look at these situations, I think that when you look at size, and you're looking at guys like the Mountain, and you're looking at big guys, I believe that Robert Baratheon is big enough and fast enough to handle someone smaller than him and to handle someone maybe a little bit bigger. And that's why I give Rob Baratheon the edge when it comes to size. So how do you feel about Jaime Lannister when it comes to his size and how he would do versus someone maybe a little bit bigger than him, maybe someone a little bit smaller?
So according to his own mind, like I said, that one quote, he thinks of Bobby B, Robert Baratheon, and Sandor and Gregor as being stronger than him, but he thinks that speed, this is according to his own thoughts, that he thinks his speed would be able to, he'd be able to work them, right? However, let me throw this out there too. The comparison you made, I definitely agree with it. The one exception though I'll make is that, like, the heavyweight division in the UFC, it's a big range, right? And sometimes the guys who, like, sometimes, you have like a 200 and he'll drop to 35 pounds, Brock Lesnar, to get down to 265, and then he'll get knocked out by Cain Velasquez, who's like 238 or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So there are, like, once you get to a certain size, you may be able to handle someone who's 50, 60 pounds bigger. Like, I did this a while ago. I did like one of those tallest character things. Pretty sure Jaime's character is right about where Nikolai Costa-Waldau is, like 6'2". Robert Baratheon and Brienne were 6'6". are implied to be 6'6". I think George R. Martin said offline that Robert Baratheon's 6'6", and Brienne is said to be the same height of him in the books. Sandor is like 6'8", and Khal Drogo is like 6'8". The Mountain was like, I don't even know, like 7'10", like closer to 8 feet than 7, right? That's a big boy, man. It's almost hard to, because he's not real. There are not people like him in the real world. However, what's interesting though, let me throw this out. Even though we're talking about Robert Baratheon and Jaime, when Ned Stark was watching Sandor Clegane fight against his brother back during that tourney, the one thing, I didn't know this until like the 20th time I read the books, but Ned Stark's watching that fight, and he's like, wait a second, Sandor never once aimed his sword at Gregor's head, whereas Gregor was trying to kill Sandor. So before Gregor became like the mount, like a Franken Mountain or whatever you want to call him, like a magically enhanced mountain, it seemed like Sandor was actually the better fighter of the two, because they broke even, and Sandor wasn't even using all his options. He was just basically defending himself, striking him a little bit, but never once going for the head. So in terms of like at least Sandor, who's 6'8", versus the Mountain, if Sandor could take the Mountain, I think Robert Baratheon's a better version of Sandor. And so, yeah, I think Robert Baratheon could take the Mountain. Jaime, I mean, yeah, I do think he could. Just, it's not realistic, though. It's not realistic with plate and mail. Like, in terms of the story, it's implied that Jaime would be able to beat the Mountain. But realistically, that's a hard fight for him. Whereas Robert Baratheon's got that Warhammer. It's a much easier fight for Robert Baratheon, I think. You're right.
Yeah, it's a hard fight for Jaime to fight someone that size, that big. You know what I mean?
With a sword.
Even as you said before, even though he was young, when he fought a guy that was considered the Mountain of his time, now he was young, he had a lot of problems with that guy. Because now he was young, not saying that the older Jaime couldn't have did better, but you see what the issue was when he fought him. And
real quick, Smiley, I'm not that. My memory of him isn't that good, but I think even because for a while when you read it, they're like he was the Mountain of their time. But I think that may have had more to do with just being dirty. You know what I mean? Just being. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, mean. I think because I first when I read it for like years, I think I thought of him as a huge dude, but then I saw a picture. I'm like, wait, that guy, he's not that big. So I think he wasn't even that big, but he was still good enough to sort of have the edge against Jaime, at least when Jaime was 15.
Yeah, well, in the show, Rob Baratheon ain't big at all.
He's Mark Addy, 5'10". Great actor, though. Great actor.
All right, so I think when it comes down to it, those are all the factors that a fight is truly made up of, right? Those are the things that determine fighters. And I understand people have favorites and fans and something, but I'm trying to go by 100% what you think when you put them together, armored up with their weapon. When I look at it all, and I've heard you argue about Jaime, and I think it's a good argument. I do. I think Jaime's a great fighter. But when I put together, when I gotta look at skill level, I gotta look at styles, techniques, because of the Warhammer, and physical strength to handle anybody, no matter how big or strong they are. I still have to pick Rob Baratheon in my heart as the best fighter of all time in Westeros. What say you after we had this talk?
So you've actually sold me in terms of this conversation, because like you said, we're both huge fans of combat sports. When you talk about it realistically, I think Robert Baratheon has that fight. But for any Jaime fans out there, I've got 3 things for you. So when he fights at the Whispering Wood, that's when he got captured. And in the books, Rob basically says, he's like, Jaime killed 3 people, and then he goes, and if they hadn't tried to stop him, there's actually a big slash, but it's like ... So he's implying that Jaime took out 3 people and was about to kill Robb Stark. The second thing is Brienne. Brienne beat Jaime, but like you said in the beginning, he was his hands were shackled and he was very malnourished. The very underappreciated line, I think it's in Feast or Crows, that she thinks back to that situation and she thinks something like, quote, a healthy two-handed Jaime, no one in the 7 Kingdoms could stand with him. Granted, that's just her opinion, but she has a pretty good understanding of the fighters out there. And last but not least, here's one from George R. R. Martin. This is a little bit ridiculous, but this is for the Jaime fans. So in that obscure MTV interview, they asked him, who would win in a fight, Jaime Lannister or Aragorn from Lord of the Rings? And he said Jaime Lannister. So that's kind of a ridiculous statement. I don't know too much about Aragorn, but apparently he has like Jedi blood. He's like extra stamina. Yeah. So that's not really a fair fight. But the fact that George R. R. Martin would say that with Jaime Lannister, knowing how big a fan he is of Lord of the Rings, that speaks to me as to what he's trying to convey with the character that he was writing, is that he thinks Jaime is the man. So based off of the fantasy version of the analysis, I would say Jaime's got Robert Baratheon's number all day.
But hey, that is up to that's Bridges' idea. I think realistically, Rob
Yeah.
Baratheon wins. I think Rob Baratheon is probably the best fighter of all time when it all comes down to. But this is who I think. Tell me in the comment section, who do you think is the greatest fighter of all time? Use what we use as a regular fighting skills to exactly examine everyone, and tell me why in the comment section you think that this person would be able to measure up. Bridge 4, I want to thank you for joining me and let the people know where they can find you.
Thank you. Come over to Bridge 4. I do have like a top fighter series. I'm actually working on a one for Lynn Corbray right now. But anyway, I'll see you guys all in the comment section because I'll probably be refreshing it every day for the next couple of weeks because I love talking about this. It's so much fun. Thank you for having me on again at Bridge 4 YouTube channel.
No doubt. And his link will be in the description. And if you want your question answered on Asked and Answered, just leave it in the comment. Be subscribed, click that bell, and leave it in the comment section. And we'll get to your question. So until next time, you know who it is. Peace and stay sexy.